It isn't terribly helpful because, of course, Boris Johnson does still have a following amongst Tory MPs. But as you say, it is something it's easier for him to do a sort of sympathetic audience in Canada than actually going and voting against this measure. And it is probably worth saying that Rishi Sunak are pretty confident that despite the quite vocal opposition from Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, of course, that not many actually MPs will actually come out and vote against this legislation. And I know I've spoken to some of Truss's most fervent supporters who say, you know what, I'm not sure that selling tobacco to kids is the hill that I really want to die on.
Right, as if Rishi Sunak didn't have enough to worry about. Now Boris Johnson's piled in, criticising his plan to ban cigarettes. For, what is it, anyone under the age of 14 will never be allowed to buy cigarettes under the change of the law, which is coming in, I think they're debating it in the Commons next week. Here is Boris Johnson speaking at the Canada Strong and Free Networking Conference in Ottawa.
When I look at some of the things that we're doing now, I think that are being done in the name of conservatism, I think they're absolutely nuts. We're banning cigars. And what is? I mean, maybe you all think that's a great idea. I just can't see what is the point of banning? Well, the party of Winston Churchill wants to ban. I mean, donnez-moi un break, as they say in Quebec. It's just mad.
That was Boris Johnson speaking in Canada. Chris Smyth, the Times Whitehall editor, joins us now. I mean, I suppose, first of all, Chris, are they banning cigars?
Yes, cigars and all tobacco products are included in the cigarette ban. And of course, Rishi Sunak would at this point insist they're not banning them. They are for anyone who is currently an adult. They're only banning them for anyone who is currently 14 and under. But yes, today's generation of children will never legally be allowed to buy a cigar. So the future Churchill impersonators will have to find some other way of doing it.
So current cigar smokers can carry on. It's just today's if you're 13 and thinking about becoming a cigar smoker, that'd be slightly more.
There are many worrying things about being 13 and becoming a cigar smoker. Yes.
He's becoming more outspoken, it seems, about Rishi Sunak. Obviously, sort of slightly playing up to whatever this conference was in Ottawa. Not terribly helpful, Rishi Sunak, at a time when this legislation is coming into the Commons next week.
It isn't terribly helpful because, of course, Boris Johnson does still have a following amongst Tory MPs. But as you say, it is something it's easier for him to do a sort of sympathetic audience in Canada than actually going and voting against this measure. And it is probably worth saying that Rishi Sunak are pretty confident that despite the quite vocal opposition from Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, of course, that not many actually MPs will actually come out and vote against this legislation. And I know I've spoken to some of Truss's most fervent supporters who say, you know what, I'm not sure that selling tobacco to kids is the hill that I really want to die on.
And actually, interestingly, I saw some polling which showed, when I asked about this policy, and not in the context of being a Conservative policy, but saying because it was originally an idea in New Zealand, that people born after 2008 will not be able to buy cigarettes when in the future. And it was 64% of people supported it. 71% of people who voted Conservative in 2019 supported it. It's this sort of weird disconnect between what some Conservative MPs say and think about, Conservative values, and actually the coalition of people who Boris Johnson put together in 2019 actually quite like this as an idea.
Yes, that's right. I mean, Rishi Sunak would not be doing this if he didn't think it was popular, and polling does show that people overwhelmingly like it. And there is something about that coalition that Boris Johnson put together. They are, quite a socially conservative, authoritarian bunch. They do like banning things. They never were libertarians, and Boris Johnson sort of once knew that, and perhaps he has forgotten it to some degree while over in Canada.
Yeah, we'll see what Rishi Sunak has to say about it. I think he's out and about today, so we may well end up having to respond. Chris, good to speak to you. Chris Smyth there, the Times Whitehall editor, on Boris Johnson criticising the plan to ban the sales of cigarettes to young people. The waiting list for routine NHS treatment in England has fallen for the 5th month in a row, according to figures out this morning from NHS England. But there are still more treatments waiting to be carried out than when Rishi Sunak promised to reduce the number in January last year. Well, the Health Secretary, Victoria Atkins, spoke to Times Radio Breakfast.
But we have seen now for 4 months in a row a reduction in waiting lists. That is a significant achievement, particularly when it is against the background of industrial action by the junior doctors. We have seen waiting lists fall. We have an unrelenting commitment and determination to reduce yet further those backlogs, and we are seeing progress.
That was Victoria Atkins on Times Radio Breakfast this morning. Let's now speak to the Times' health editor, Eleanor Hayward. I mean, Eleanor, 5th month in a row that the number's fallen. I mean, that's good news.
Yeah, I mean, the fall is from 7.58 million to 7.54 million. So it's not like a massive reduction, but it's better than it going up. So I suppose you have to welcome any sign of progress.
And I suppose there's also a lot of churn in there because there's people being added to the list as well as people having their treatment. But the overall number of people on the waiting lists still higher than when Rishi Sunak promised to cut the waiting list last year.
Yeah, there's about 300,000 more people on the waiting list than there were when Rishi Sunak promised to cut them. So it stood at 7.2 million last January, and now it's at 7.54 million. So the overall picture is still of things getting worse, but we have seen a bit of improvement over the past few months.
And what has apart from just saying that they want to cut the list, what has the government, what has the NHS in England been doing to try and bring down this list? Is there signs that this might be working if there was a new focus on bringing down the waiting list?
Yeah, there's been quite a lot of investment in things like surgical hubs, which are aimed at speeding up the number of, say, hip operations that are done in a day. So there's new centres that aim to get through operations much faster, and they have improved things quite a bit. But at the same time, demand's going up the whole time. So A&E's actually had their busiest ever month in March, the figures today have shown. So more than 2 million people turned up at A&E's, and that means that of those, about 10% are waiting more than 12 hours in A&E waiting rooms, which is tens of thousands of people.
And how do we know this compares to other parts of the UK?
Yeah, it's bad everywhere. The Tories like to point to things being worse in Wales, which is obviously Labour run. But I mean, everything's terrible in Wales, terrible in England. So I'm not sure drawing attention to how bad things are is really helping them.
It's not really helping, yeah. And it's really good to speak to you. Eleanor Hayward there, the Times' health editor, on those figures which show the waiting lists in England have fallen, but they're still higher than they were.